Lichtman is a distinguished professor in modern American history at American University in Washington, D.C., and has developed a system of 13 factors or keys to determine the outcome of presidential races.
The keys to the White House is not dependent upon the events of the campaign. It's not dependent on the polls, which are snapshots, not predictors. It's not dependent upon the pundits. I love them, but they have no scientific basis for their opinions and no track record of advanced prediction. My system, the keys to the White House, taps into how American presidential elections really work as votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party. And it has a big message. It's governing, not campaigning, that counts. And on the basis of these keys, not campaign events, punditry, or polls, I predicted on September 5th that we would have a new path-breaking president, the first woman president, and the first president of mixed Asian and African descent.
It's a 13-point checklist that uses true or false statements. When 5 or fewer items on the list are false, the nominee of the incumbent party, in this instance the Democratic Party, is predicted to win the election.
I have 13 key questions, and if 6 or more go against the White House party, they're predicted losers. Fewer than 6, they're predicted winners. I've been right about this since I predicted Ronald Reagan's re-election in April 1982, nearly 3 years ahead of time, when 60% of Americans said he was too old to run again and his approval ratings were historically low. So how many keys count against the White House party, Harris and the Democrats? They lose my mandate key because they lost U.S. House seats in 2022. Obviously, they lose the incumbency key. The incumbent is not running, the vice president doesn't count. They lose the foreign/military failure key. The Middle East is a disaster with no good end in sight. They lose the incumbent charisma key. The charisma keys are very high threshold keys. You have to be one of those once in a generation, across the board, truly inspirational candidates. Whatever you may think of Harris, she's only been a candidate for a little while. She hasn't reached the level of an iconic candidate who secures this key like Franklin Roosevelt on the Democratic side or Ronald Reagan, the Republican. So that's 4 keys down, 2 keys short of what would be needed to predict an incumbent party defeat.
That while his keys have survived decades and changes in society, politics, demography, and the economy, he acknowledges that as a human being he could be wrong, but remains confident in his call.
It's always possible there could be such cataclysmic, unprecedented changes to break 160 years of historical patterns. The problem is you never know in advance. What I see in the data, and again, I'm not basing my prediction on it, but to answer your question, it seems to strongly favor Harris in a lot of the swing states for the following reason. This is an election with probably the greatest gender divide we've ever seen. And in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, early votes are very heavily tilted towards women. And if that continues, that's very positive for Harris.
And on the polls that show a dead-heat race both nationally and in the key battleground states that remain too close to call.
All of these polls are noise. You know, they tell you the error margin is plus and minus 3%, but it's actually much larger. That's pure statistical error. You've got to add on to that non-statistical error. People don't respond to pollsters. They lie. They change their minds. Plus, the pollsters don't know who's actually going to vote, so they have to guess at likely voters. That at least doubles the margin of error to plus and minus 6%. So what's going to decide the election is not the polls, but in which direction the error is going to be.
Food for thought as the world waits for the fat lady to sing. That only happens when votes start being tabulated after polls close on November 5th. Shervin Bryce, SABC News, New York.